Well, let's get some more reaction now to the Prime Minister's comments that enough is enough and now it's time to be more robust in tackling extremism. I'm joined by the Senior Fellow at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, Rashad Ali, himself a former radical. The Prime Minister says enough is enough. Tim Farron said enough was enough 2 weeks ago. What is the point at which we will see a change in strategy?
Well, I think it's important to bear in mind there's a lot of new strategies actually taking place right now. What was mentioned was in terms of the online effect and what is happening online in terms of the radicalisation that has been done by ISIS and others in terms of really utilising very professional means to do so. Actually, we've seen a commitment by the big tech companies, the online companies, to actually produce an online fora to at least deal with those things technologically. There's been a lot of investment looking at how to tackle, on the prevention side, more efforts to really try and build, resilience to extremism. And there's a lot of efforts that, I guess, in the offline space, people are talking about, whether it's more prevention strategies that are coming on board, whether it's more community groups engaging. But I think the bigger questions really are internationally. I mean, we're looking at dealing with these issues which are symptomatic of the larger problems. If you look at the situation in Syria, we're trying to tackle ISIS on the one hand without tackling all the massive regional conflict in the region where the Assad regime has literally allowed ISIS to grow in order to provide some semi-justification for itself. It's involved in a horrific war against its own citizens, which provides arguably the largest motivation for people to join extremist groups.
And that you see as the reason for people being radicalised on UK soil?
Well, you see that as the largest reason for radicalisation taking place, both internationally, but also couple that with the fact that ISIS is able to grow, proselytise, push its ideology, actually recruit individuals globally, and without that it just wouldn't happen.
But how is it that young people that have grown up in this country, have taken advantage of all this country has to offer, then see a wider cause as being the most important thing in their lives? How do they go from being the normal teenagers that grow up in London, that perhaps go out on a Saturday night to places like Borough Market, and then become killing machines?
Sure, I think it's a question that's probably on everyone's mind, that how does this happen? And we ask it every time these incidents take place. And I think there's a number of things. First of all, we need to understand that yes, there is a role of poisonous ideology. There are people that are telling these people, you don't belong to this country, you're not Brits, you actually belong to us as a nation. And when they say us as a nation, they're not talking actually about the 1.6 global Muslims, they're talking about the Puritans, those who have embraced a very extreme Islamist ideology, one which separates themselves not just from the wider society, but obviously from the entire Muslim populace as well. And so they have this type of sectarianism where they belong to that group. That's the in-group, and everybody else is part of the out-group. You couple that with a host of kind of smattering of religious scripture, you couple that with political grievances that people have, whether it's the situation in Syria or the previous wars in Iraq, and you have this type of cocktail of kind of identity politics, religious extremism, political ideology, the nurturing of grievances and manipulation of grievances, which makes an individual then see the world in a completely different light. He's no longer now someone that lives in a country where his religion is respected, he has the freedom to practice his faith. He's no longer part of a diverse Muslim diaspora that's part of a broader British cultural society with different countries, different cultures celebrated. He now belongs to a revolutionary group, a radical Islamist group, one which is separated from the entire world and is on this pathway to establishing its glorious caliphate, this glorious new world order that is going to challenge everything in front of it. And therefore the greater good justifies such atrocities.
Tell us about your personal experience. How easy was it to get to you and to get you to that point that you're describing?
Well, I think what's probably more relevant now is being able to understand what's happening right now. I mean, we're looking at things like the online space and the offline radicalisation.
But you can give us an insight into what it is that is tapped into with a young individual to
sure,
turn their mind.
And I think there's a lot of research now that shows that the things that we kind of experienced back in the 90s that now are still quite relevant. Identity and belonging is quite one of the biggest things. Understanding political grievances. The role that manipulating religious sentiment in creating a political ideology which captures that all together. All of those things can make somebody shape their worldview, their moral perspective, and one which then says, well, hold on a second, if our women and children are being killed, then we can literally target their women and children. That, hold on a second, our way of life is not allowed to be practiced. It's a kind of like contradictory dissonance. That on the one hand, they have literally all the liberties to practice the most extreme forms of religious Puritanism in the UK. You know, there's very little that we clamp down upon. Yet at the same time hold this contradictory idea that we're victims and we need to spread our ideology. And so couple that with reasonable grievances about what's happening in the world. You know, if you look at what's happening in Syria as an example, where 500,000 people have been killed, where literally millions of people have been displaced, and the world has sat back and done nothing, it poses a question of, do we really believe in human rights? Are we really going to stand by and allow this to take place? How do we have Russia and the United Nations Security Council justifying all of this? What are we really going to do? And so all
those
those
political
things come
thoughts
together.
don't really justify murder, though, do they?
No, of course not. Which is why it's all the things that I mentioned. It's a sense of belonging which makes you identify with a certain set of group that are being victims. It's a certain mindset that says, well, our morality is very different. We are now in a war and these people are in an asymmetric war with us. It's certain religious justifications that come in and say, well, actually, hold on a second. You know, even if we kill innocent people, they may go to paradise. There's all sorts of strange things.
But are there religious justifications? Because these are questions that people are asking the whole time. Is there a section, a surah in the Quran that justifies what these people are doing? Because they clearly are calling themselves Muslims.
Sure, I mean, I'm not going to get into a debate about are they Muslim or not, but essentially, Islam is a vast tradition that for centuries has had views on law, has views on ethics. And so Muslims who come from that tradition will tell you very, very clearly Islamic law has never justified killing of civilians, even in warfare. They will differentiate between when legitimate wars can take place and not. The problem isn't that these people are following medieval classical Islam. The problem is Islamist ideology is a very modern phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that's lasted over the last century or so, where you've got this politicized version of ideological Islam, couple that with Puritanism, couple that with, I guess, the kind of religious and political grievances, and you have this cocktail. You have angry young men, you have their reading of scripture, they want it to be justified in this way, and so movements which have adopted this very odd reading of religious scripture are now becoming more and more radical, more and more politicized, and I guess it's what people have described as the radicalization of religion rather than the, you know, the scriptural aspects of religion coming in to justify these types of things.
Okay, Rashad Ali, thank you very much for speaking to us.